Yeah, hi, I'm Lisa Fowler from Mount Macedon Realty, and welcome to Meet the Macedon Ranges. Tonight I'm chatting to a Wood End resident, ABC television presenter of Dream Gardens, an author, operator of the tour company Travelling Masterclasses, and very well known garden designer. Welcome, Mr. Michael McCoy. Hi,
Thanks,
Michael.
Lisa. Thank you. Thank you.
Could you jump in and tell us how old you were when the gardening bug took hold?
17 and three quarters.
Excellent, very precise. Please tell me how you
Yes.
remember that.
Well, it's kind of a sad story, actually, because it was largely a consequence of my father dying at that point in my life. And my I had just finished my HSC
Showing your age there.
here in Melbourne. Yeah, yeah. Well, how is that? Of course, my
HSC.
HSC, it was in, oh yeah, HSC for sure. Yeah, yeah. I'm going, hang on, I haven't given anything away except that I was 17 and a half. How is she doing these calculations? All
No, just say
right, it was
VCE. Always say
1981.
VCE.
It was 1981. Anyway, so yeah, I finished my HSC when my father went into hospital and it got a critical sort of circumstances, and I stayed home from doing anything for that block of holidays so I could drive my mum into the hospital every day to see my dad. I was also a learner, so it gave me a chance to, to get lots of driving practice. Predated the idea of logbooks, of course. But anyway, and during that time, my mum was propagating some plants. I think it was just some little indoor plant, just sticking cuttings in a glass of water on the kitchen windowsill. And I was just fascinated by this idea that cuttings of a plant in water could grow their own roots and could become self-supporting. The idea that you could break a piece off a living organism that was not itself capable of life, but by being given its life sustained by keeping it in water, it would grow roots and eventually become a self-sustaining organism. I just was so, I mean, I was a bit of a sciencey kid. Like I was interested in science, and I just was so taken by this idea. And I think largely it was a consequence of the boredom of being stuck at home and the stress of being um, of my father's
Your father.
situation. And I don't know whether there was a kind of a notion of the idea of prolonging or revivifying life, or that somehow, anyway, one way or another, I just got absolutely obsessed with this idea of propagation of plants via cuttings. And so I just went crazy for this over those holidays, and within a few months had the front veranda absolutely covered in pots of stuff that I'd propagated. And then started to think, well, I've got to do something with this. I had no interest in gardening at all. Like, I mean, I hated gardening as a kid, and our parents would sometimes make us garden, come out and weed, and I just couldn't stand it. So, but I had all these plants and thought I've got to put them somewhere, and thought, well, there's probably a good way to do this and a bad way to do this, and sort of started to look into it a bit. And honestly, from that moment, it was an absolute like Damascus Road moment. I knew I didn't want to do anything else. I mean, I was signed up for a science degree at Melbourne Uni with the intention of going to vet science. That morphed into a degree in botany. And so it just, from that moment and ever since, I've never wanted to do anything else.
Wow. I wonder, going back to your cuttings on the veranda, was there a bit of God syndrome there? Like you were in control
Yeah, I look, I
of these
wonder.
cuttings?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was saving. I was giving these cuttings life. Like there was a kind of
Yeah,
a
which
mortality issue thing going on, I suspect.
exactly.
And
Let's not go down the psychology rabbit hole, but
yeah,
yeah,
I
it
know.
sounds like there's a bit of a connection.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
But look,
so
honestly,
then,
yeah, go on.
no, I was just going to say, then
Oh,
you developed that passion and then transformed it into a business.
well, yeah, in a fashion. I mean, it's as a gardener, because I went to uni and did a science degree, and in my final year, I was so obsessed with gardening, and I went to see the guy who was in charge of the Melbourne University botany department, and said to him, "Look, all I want to do is be a gardener. I'm not really interested in the academic life, which I had up till that point been absolutely interested in." And he said, look, you know, you're crazy. You're never going to make any money. And you know, I was about 19 or 20, you know, in my final year, and I'm just going, who needs money? You just got to do that. You just got to do what you love, you know.
All you need is the air that I breathe.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. And he said to me, look, I think you're crazy. He said, you will never make any money except that. But if you insist on doing this, I will make sure I get you the best apprenticeship that I possibly can get you into, and that I'll get you some time working at Kew Gardens in London, and I'll set up your career in a way that he had an interest in botanic gardens worldwide. And he said to me, you know, there is a big gulf between the botanists and the gardeners, and you are now a botanist, and if you become a gardener, you'll be a really useful intermediary between those two worlds, and I'll do everything I can to assist you. And so that's that. So I then did an apprenticeship in gardening, then became a full-time gardener for 10 years, working on gardens on Mount Macedon and in town. And after that, decided to set up my own design business.
During that period, I hear you got to work with one of your all-time idols.
I so did. Yeah, it was. I mean, this story is just like, everybody has someone in their life, or, you know, someone who you idolize when you're young in your area of work or your area of consuming passion. You know, someone who you just thought, oh, they are the greatest. And I found myself in my apprenticeship really quite disillusioned. I discovered that there was nothing like the amount of passion in the professional world of gardening as there was in the amateur world of gardening. And so I just I thought, look, I think I've made a big mistake here, and I think I need to go and do something else. And someone handed me someone who was concerned for my, you know, demoralized state, handed me a couple of books and said, I'll see what you think of these. Now, I had no intention of reading them, 2 gardening books, no intention of reading them, but I look at them and go, okay, I reckon there's about 3 or 4 weeks reading in that, so I'll keep them for 3 or 4 weeks. And the night before I hand them back, I'll flip open a page and have a look and hand it back and say, you know, a nice point about the hydrangea.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, and deflect from the fact, avoid any engagement about whether I read them. So the night before I hand these things back, I flip open one of these books into the preface, and my whole world opened up in that moment. I read one sentence, one small paragraph, and just went, oh my goodness, this is my man. I have found my window into my world. I had lost any conviction that it actually existed, and in reading this one paragraph, I just went, it exists, and this is my way in. That this guy thinks the way I want to think. He approaches, he has the level of inquiry and curiosity that really engages me. And I became obsessed with this writer, a guy by the name of Christopher Lloyd, who was by then nearly 70. And then a couple of years later, a mate of mine said, look, are you going to sign up for this international conference that's in Melbourne or not? You know, Christopher Lloyd's coming. And I went, what? You know, like, are you serious? So I immediately signed up, went along. Immediately after the first talk, that happened to be my professor from the botany department at Melbourne University, you know, 5 or 6 years earlier, I went up to him to say, hey, congratulations on your opening address. And he was talking to this old man named Christopher Lloyd and introduced me. And
Did you still have the book?
Pardon?
Did you still have the book?
I do. In fact, it's right behind me here. And
did you get him to sign it?
I did get him to sign it.
Brilliant.
But hilariously, he wrote in the front, he said, Malcolm, I'm delighted to meet you.
Well, you should have changed your name by default to Malcolm.
Well, there was that possibility. The other possibility is that he had such bad handwriting that by a tiny little bit of correction with a blue pen, you now can't tell quite what it says. It's just a name that starts with M.
M. It's got to be you. It's got to be you.
Anyway.
Oh, brilliant story.
So he then by the end of that weekend, in this case, in the front of the book, he said, "Please visit me socially." And then we started to write. For some reason or other, we started to correspond. And my employer in Australia had said to me, "Oh, look, Michael, we love what you're doing so much. We'd love you to commit to 5 or 10 years of working for us." And I said, "Well, look, thank you, but I'm actually going to go and work overseas for a year next year." And he said, "Oh, no, don't do that. If you'll go for a shorter time, I'll pay your airfare and I'll pay your wages while you're away."
Thank you.
So anyway, somehow or other, must have discussed this with Christopher Lloyd, and he said, "Well, why don't you come and work with me for the summer?" And now this guy's house was built in 1460. Christopher Lloyd said, a big old half-timbered manor in East Sussex, one of the old hall residences that predates the idea of chimneys even. They used to just have a big fire in the middle of the major hall. This enormous, like a big church hall, where all the farm workers used to use, and actually the Lord and Lady would sleep on the floor with a big fire in the middle of the room. And this hall has been restored to that state, but with a timber floor. I knew it backwards from photos by the time I got there, but a 1960s boy living in this 1460s house with his international guru.
Yeah, right.
It's just
what a kickstart.
To be true. And to this day, and he died now 14 years ago. Right. And I've gone back to stay since then. It's now full of student gardeners. Well, the house isn't, but the garden that people volunteer to go and work there because they're just dying to actually get the chance to work in this garden. And when I tell them that I lived and worked with the old guy, they just won't believe me. They just can't believe that it's even faintly possible. It was the most ridiculous good fortune,
Yeah, indeed. So I hope when they ask you to autograph their books that you write the wrong name.
Right.
So how on earth do you juggle your schedule between writing, gardening, television broadcasting? What does your day look like?
It's incredibly messy and spectacularly inefficient. I mean, like unforgivably inefficient. I'm a shocking businessman. I think I'm a good designer and I think I'm a good writer, but I'm a useless businessman, and I'm not so much terrible at managing my time because I'm highly motivated, but I've just got my finger in too many pies, and
is it organized in your head, or not really?
Oh yeah. And but one of the things
sounds like you need a good PA.
Oh God, I so do. Oh my word, Well, in our house, we call him a Leone. I need a Leone because one of our most organized friends is Leone, and I so need a Leone in my life. But I think one of the problems with my brain with all of this is that for 10 years as a gardener in one major garden, all I ever attended to, and this is the life of a gardener, you're pretty much just attending to. Each day you're just making a decision about saying what is the most urgent thing today. And even if you have plans for something, a tree will fall down or something happens and you have to attend to something else. So all of your plans, even if you make any or attempt to make any, are thwarted, and you end up just living in the moment all the time. And the trouble is, it's not really a way to run a business. And for 25 years, I've been trying to run one like that, and it doesn't really work.
So you're sort of adopting the climatic approach that affects gardening to your business mind. I think you better put a shout out for a PA, a good bookkeeper.
Well, look, fortunately, about 2 or 3 years ago, when I was planning for kind of what next in my life and world, and was thinking about running some travel stuff, etc., a very, very organized and administratively gifted nephew of mine decided he was going to adopt me as his needy uncle.
Charity case.
Yeah. And he is amazing. And I mean, he pushes me to do stuff that I'm really, really kind of, not so much that I don't want to do, but outside of my comfort zone. And it's been amazing. That's been since since the beginning of 2018. We've been working together, and all of our activities, every single activity on our books came to nothing with COVID, was absolutely wiped out by COVID. And we're sort of gradually rebuilding that now. But fortunately,
I was going to ask you that. Can you design a garden remotely during COVID? Or you got to be on the ground?
Well, what actually it turned into for me, because of the lack of travel, or the lack of mobility, I actually started offering phone design coaching. And I love the idea of coaching people in design rather than, I actually enjoy it more than designing for them. One of the things that I found actually quite challenging in my world of design is that I would have reasonably or quite keen gardeners coming to me and asking me to design gardens for them. And I would watch them lose confidence in their own abilities as they watched my confidence. They would entirely hand over the responsibility and as a consequence, what I would often find is that these gardeners, these owners, would end up being somewhat alienated from their own garden in a way that gardeners who design and create their own gardens they're never that alienated. You know, that I could see that the design process in some cases was coming between them. And in the same way, if you brought in an interior designer, well, I don't know how it works actually in real estate in a way that, but you bring in an interior designer, you want someone who's going to embody that which you know, that's something of your
it's
personality.
Got to be very, very personal. That's right.
Yeah, exactly. And that doesn't always happen. And so you can imagine living in a house that feels like it was designed for someone else. And in a similar way with gardens, whilst you might really, I mean, I take great pride in not just providing a kind of cookie cutter approach and listening to what people want. What I was really a bit disturbed by how much by this alienation that some owners would gain. And so what I then started to move into is the idea of coaching people to design their own gardens so that they stayed fully in charge of the process themselves, but that through consultation with me, I would be guiding them towards quality decision making. I didn't make the decisions for them. I just told them, this is the kind of thinking that I would be applying to your issue. These are the opportunities of your site. These are the limitations of your site as I see it. And these are the kind of thinkings that I would apply. It's been really rewarding over this last 15, 18 months to be coaching people in designing their own gardens. I've absolutely loved it. And that has had to be over the phone.
And at the end of the project, they're so much closer to what they've created.
Oh, absolutely.
So rather than just paying out money and having it done for them, and it goes back to that thing, rather than giving people a fish, you teach them how to fish.
Yeah.
Much longer lasting.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very often when people outsource something like that, and it's very often the case with gardens, that I would have clients saying, look, I don't want to actually do any maintenance in my garden. I don't want to actually work in my garden. And through further chatting with them, you'd realize that what this was not actually a lack of interest. It was a lack of empowerment. You know, that they felt like, I'm going to mess it up. Don't trust me with it. I don't know what to do. And so I would say to them, well, look, as long as I can teach you what to do, you know, are you prepared to give it a go? And the number of clients I would then turn up, you know, for a consultation, and they'd both be out there in the garden with the seconders going, oh, we've done everything you told us to do, Michael. What can we do now? And loved it because they felt empowered. So often when we outsource something, it's just an expression of disempowerment. And so what I'd rather do is
their investment in the project will be ongoing too, rather than thinking that's not my gig. Once the garden's established, they'll be more likely to be immersed in it.
Oh, their buy-in is enormous. Yeah.
That's a good term.
And it's so I think it's an amazing alternative. And up until now, there was this disconnect between you either have to bring someone in from externally who would pretty much hand over a plan, and in many cases you didn't know what you were going to get, or you were left to your own resources. And to go down this middle line of saying, look, I want to stay in full ownership of this garden and in full charge of the process. But I know, I know. In fact, on a couple of occasions over my designing life, and one of them was working for Leo Schofield in Sydney. After he'd finished his stint down here in Melbourne running the Melbourne Arts Festival, and he went back to Sydney. He had this amazing old house called Bronte House right on Bronte Beach, incredible house. And he asked me to go and advise him on the garden. And I'm there for the first weekend. I walk in and I'm kind of incredibly intimidated because the garden was amazing anyway. And I said to him, honestly, you don't need me. You're clearly a very good gardener. And he went, Michael, you don't understand. If this garden the quality of this garden is limited to my abilities, I will never be happy.
Right.
It's got to be better than I'm capable of doing it, you know?
Yeah.
And so he fully acknowledged that he had some real skills, but he fully acknowledged that he needed to outsource some of it to take it to a new level and to give it an edge that it otherwise wouldn't have had. And so what an incredible privilege as a designer to do that, So there's a lot more talking through principles with people rather than saying, okay, plant a pear there and a maple there. It's about saying, look, I'll tell you how to think this through, and then you make the decision, And it's great
and then
fun.
Again, it's such a, pardon the pun, but organic thing, because it's not like a piece of art that's stationary. Once you plant the garden, it's evolving constantly. So it might be you tap in a few years' time and say, okay, we want to take it in this direction or that direction, and that can be a collaboration between you and the owner.
Oh, well, that's been my longest client goes back to 1996.
Yeah.
And I've been designing with them in their garden for 25 years.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Now, because time's ticking, can you tell us a bit more about travelling masterclasses and forthcoming tours?
Well, in a similar way. Golly. Yeah, well, we just had to cancel 2 in November, but, everyone's in the same boat. In a similar way of the communication of principles, I've been running tours for another company, a Sydney-based company, for Graham Ross from Better Homes and Gardens, and I still run tours for them for 20 years, since the year 2000. And I love doing that, and I still love doing that. But I could see that that there were a lot of Australians do a lot of garden travel. I mean, we do a lot of highly specific interest travel, but the garden travel industry in Australia is as big as anywhere in the world, if not bigger than almost anywhere else in the world. And but the thing that felt like it was missing to me is that kind of truly empowering. There's a lot of garden-based holiday travel, whereas what I wanted to do is to get with a busload of hungry gardeners and to be talking through what we were learning. So our New Zealand trip, for instance, which is next April, we're talking about design principles all the way. On the way to a garden, I'll be saying to them, look, we're going to this garden because I really want you to see this expression of this kind of principle that could be applied to your garden at home. And then when we leave, we talk about, what impact did that have on you? How could it have done? What could it have done better? What did it do really well?
Yeah.
And it's just, so I've gone around Europe, the UK and Europe with groups like this, and honestly, the quality of discussion on the coach is everyone's a bit shy at first, of course, because you've got beginners and you've got people who really know what they're talking about. But in the end, there's just this fantastic sense of everybody helping out each other's, taking the next step along their learning curve. And I suppose
that the depth of conversation can continue because you're sort of living together on a tour, rather than a symposium where you walk away and you can't discuss it. So how many people on a tour?
They're quite. We try and keep them down to 20. In order for it to be intimate. Look, so far, we only got set up and only ran tours for a year before we had to shut down this time. Yeah. But having followed this principle for a long time, I know it works, and I just love seeing people share a common passion, traveling together who share this common passion.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, everyone's going to be taking that opportunity up with a vengeance when we get back. Any places left on the first one?
There are a few left on New Zealand in April. In the last week of April, I think we've got about 5 spots left on that. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. All right.
And then we're hoping to go in November as well. So, yeah.
Hoping to go again. All right. Good luck.
Thank you.
To all of us. A few little shout outs. Hi to Alex. Hello to John and Caroline. See you on Friday, you two. Hi to Zali. Robert's saying what a good idea to get a PA. Agreed. And Tracy Strong. Hello, Tracy.
Tracy.
Garden design coaching. There's a business, Michael.
Yeah.
You've obviously discussed that with Zali. Alicia Pickering saying such fantastic insights. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for watching, Alicia. And Alex is saying, do you have any new projects lined up for the end of lockdown?
Yeah, look, there's a couple sitting there waiting that I've been delaying with due to just being distracted by other things. But the thing is, the portfolio career idea means that I don't actually spend a lot of time doing any one of those things. So right, yeah. I'm very limited as to how many projects I take on at any one time. But yeah. Anyway, so it's a very diverse working week, that's for sure.
You probably do. You don't know about it because you haven't got a PA.
Yes.
And Tracy's saying your passion for your work is infectious, which is very true.
Oh, well, Tracy was the producer when I was on radio 20 years ago. It was the producer of the afternoons on ABC back in the day when we used to spend every Monday afternoon talking about design principles. It was amazing fun. And yeah, so we go back a long way.
Hey, Tracy. Righto, Macedon Ranges. Where's your favourite places to hang out? Go walking, hiking?
Yeah, well, it's been fantastic. Aren't we just, every single interview must say this, but aren't we just so lucky over these last 18 months? Yep. And where I am, my nearest neighbour being the Tip, basically transfer station. But where I am, we're on dirt roads that go straight into the dirt roads that run all the way up to the top of the mountain. And I can walk from my house to the cross on fire tracks alone without going out of my 5-kilometre limits when it's a 16-kilometre return walk. But the furthest most point is exactly 5 kilometers away. The cross, or it's within the 5 kilometers.
Yeah, right.
And so yes, so I just love walking. I really like walking from home as well. There's something really nice about walking the tracks that you normally drive on,
rather than jumping in a car and parking.
Yeah, well, I once did this with my son when he was about 10 or 11. I just said, look, let's spend some of the holidays walking all the roads that we commonly drive on through here, like driving along. Isn't it hilarious? Now, I know there's Morris Road, what's it called, that goes all the way to the pub? Oh, that's ridiculous. I know this road so well. Anyway, so roads that we've driven along forever, that Mount Macedon pub. Anyway, and
Douglas.
Douglas, thank you. So we walked along Douglas and walked all of Douglas all the way through, and then kind of had lunch at the general store, and then walked home another way, and it was great for him also. But to experience the smells and the temperature changes and the air, and you suddenly realize that what you never realized was a hill. Actually, there's a hill where you didn't know. It's like all the bike riders know this now, of course.
Yeah.
But I reckon my favorite walk of the last couple of years, and it's only a recent discovery, which is a bit embarrassing having lived here since early 1993, is Mount Tarong, up that zigzagging track up to the top of that, and then behind that little saddle behind that, where there's a junction of a few roads up there, and it is
Hell's Hole, I think it's called.
Is that what it is? Oh yeah. Well, and it's looking back into the township of Mount Macedon from the north face of Toorong, looking
Oh
down
yeah, doesn't get better.
as the sun's setting low, horizontal light coming through there. It is so beautiful. Oh, golly, I love it
Yeah,
so
no,
much.
that is, I agree with you. That is the best view of the mount from there. Stunning. Stunning, right over the top of my office too.
Yes.
We have run out of time, but on that note, take the time, people, to have a look at my website to see all the beautiful properties that I do have for sale in the Macedon Ranges. And while you're there, have a look at thegardenist.com.au and travellingmasterclasses.com.au to book your new holiday to NZ with Michael, and and check out Michael's amazing work. So thank you very much for joining me, Michael. That was wonderful, and thanks everyone for watching. And take care. Bye for now.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, Michael.